What up, Screen Fiends? I'm GB, and you're tuned in to Headz TV, where we like to discuss all the wonderful things appearing on your movie and your TV screens. So in today's episode, we're going to discuss The Walking Dead and how I feel seasons 1 through season 6, episode 9, that's No Way Out, can be considered one self-contained story. What do I mean by that? It really does have a perfect beginning, middle, and a pretty satisfying ending. I'm glad they didn't end it there, obviously, if you look behind me, but they really could have. The way I look at season 6, episode 10, all the way to current, is basically as a sequel to an already perfectly told story. So, of course, spoilers ahead. If you're not caught up to date, shame on you. Go catch up and come on back. But I'm pretty sure if you clicked on this video, you're all caught up. So the way we're going to break it down is every self-contained story has a first act, second act, third act, beginning, middle, end, right? So we're going to do 2 seasons per act, basically. Of course, each season kind of bleeds into the next a little bit. So it's not as clean cut as I'm going to make it sound. But for the most part, this is the way the story flows. So first you have your first act, the intro. Seasons 1 and season 2. What happens in those seasons is we get an introduction to the world. The zombie apocalypse. What's the driving event in this story? What's going to drive these characters forward to their coming story arcs? We also get an introduction to almost all of the major characters, with the exception of Michonne and Abraham and Group. All of the major characters in this part of the story are introduced in the first 2 episodes, which would be the first, 20 minutes, half hour of a movie? So that sounds about right. Now, with the introduction of all the major characters, we also get the growing bonds between them, rivalries and friendships being formed. You get to learn the different dynamics of the characters and how they work together or against each other, in some cases, Rick and Shane. But we really get a good understanding of who these people are at the beginning of the story. And it's much different than how they end up at the end of the story, those who make it. So, the basic point of the first 2, it's people moving from place to place, looking for a safe place to live. All the while gaining bonds with each other, as well as more people to their party. So, nowhere seems to be safe by the end of season 2. But before we get there, as season 2 progresses, we get more and more conflicts with people. In season 1, there wasn't really much conflicts with people. There was the whole thing with Merle and Daryl, and then there was the Vatos, who turned out to actually be good people who were just trying to live in this world. So, in season 2, we start to see that the conflicts within the group are growing. You know, the whole Shane thing with, his different style of leading to Rick's. And the whole thing with Lori, of course, obviously. And then we have when Randall enters the story and the Dave and Tony from Nebraska enter the story. We start to get that outside threat too making its way in. Where now we're starting to see actual bad people who could pose a threat to the group. Small, but the threads are there. So, of course, by the end of season 2, they realize no place is safe. The farm is destroyed. Rick and Shane's relationship is destroyed. Carl is forced to put zombie Shane down. Rick is forced to kill Shane. It's absolute mayhem on the farm. The group gets split up for a little bit. Of course, they find each other rather quickly. But that's basically the end of your first act. And how does it end? With Rick saying, I'm in charge. I'm putting my foot down. It's the Rick-tatorship. It's my way or the highway, people. And it really gives us a good feel to where these characters' story arcs are starting to go. Even that early on. So that basically ends your first act, right? Now, your second act, which would be seasons 3 and 4, is going to be your rising action into your climax, and the falling action, basically, it bleeds into season 5 a little bit, right? So, season 3 slows things down a bit after the way season 2 ends on such a crazy note. So even in a movie, you see that, that pick up and slow down of the pace, right? So in season 3, we get a little bit of a time skip. Movies do that too. All stories do it. Not all, but many stories do it. All right, so we get after a time skip, we get an intro to a new, safer place. It's undesirable because, it's a prison. You're living in a cell. It's dirty, dark, damp, close quarters. We learn the dangers of that later in season 4. But it's also desirable because it's walled in and it's strong and it's fortified and you can secure it, which in this world is like gold, right? So we get that. Of course, they have to fight for the new place. Of course, they have to go at it with the current inhabitants of the prison, and they win it over. They get through all the walkers, they get through the people. The prison is theirs. It's secure. It's theirs. They have their safe place. Their group is intact. Of course, they do lose 2 people in the process of getting the prison, which is a terrible thing, especially one of them being Lori, which, was an amazing scene. So we also, in season 3, start to see a real human threat rising. Not like before. We had the little sneak peek of the possibility that's out there in season 2. But now with the governor, we start to actually see a real threat grow. Another strong-willed, strong-minded group out there. But this one is run by the anti-Rick. A guy who's basically the opposite of Rick. Instead of doing everything for his community, he's really out for himself. All right. So moving on. So then there's the rising threat of people. We see that. We also start to see our group kind of break down and start to go a little bit on the more not so heroic route as far as their actions go, and it's harder for them to make the right choices, is what I'm saying, right? So that's a good middle act thing right there. That's a good middle story thing, where now your characters are starting to become at such conflict with themselves. So forget about all this outside conflict. They're also dealing with they're starting to deal with their own demons on what they have to do to survive. So then, we get into the whole conflict with the governor, and then we move into season 4 with 2 storylines going on. The conclusion of the governor, which I would say is your big climax. But the whole thing is because they found this safe place. But because Herschel kind of explains it, because they were living under such close quarters and such poor conditions, diseases happen, people get sick, people die. And in this world, when you die, you come back, So the whole breakdown of the prison with Too Far Gone and the whole first half of season 4 is really like your climax. It's your characters were at a high point, and now something happens and just crushes them and brings them down. So then after the Too Far Gone, we get into the group is split up now. So now we have like your falling action, the result of the climax, and how that's going to play out. So the group is separated, and hope is kind of, they're losing hope, and it's becoming harder to survive with fewer numbers, and other losses are occurring, and it's a terrible place to be in, right? They're almost at their absolute lowest. Okay? So now you're also getting more human threat now, but now the human threat is becoming more unmanageable, more scary. The human threat is becoming more of a monster in the story, where the governor wasn't really a monster until the very end. And even then, he started to come back a little bit, right? But then you get Joe and the Claimers, and you get the people at Terminus, and this is truly evil. These are people that want to do terrible, horrible things. They don't just want to kill you and take your place. or they don't just want to kick you out of your place and possibly even let most of you live. They want to do terrible things to you and kill you when they're finished, you know. And in Terminus' case, they want to clean your bones. All right, so then that's basically the end of your climax, your second act, right? Now we get into the third act stuff, the leading into the conclusion, the final action sequences, if you will, right? So they get away from the Terminus people, and they have to do it in such brutal ways that now they're lost. Most of them are just as savage and just as evil as many of the bad people that they've encountered. So they're back together now, and you would think that they're at their strongest, but because they're back on the road with no safe place, no community or anything, they're at their lowest. I would say in the second half of season 5, when they start off there, season 5, episode 9, they're at their lowest. There are more great losses. They lose Beth, they lose Tyrese, they lost Herschel. All good people, all people that were meant to be a beacon of hope. And this is great storytelling, because at this point in the story, you're like, wow, is there any hope left? Every time you get a good person, a person that has beliefs or that can maybe do something good in this world, they get killed. And that's a perfect way to start the end, because you're like, oh my God, how is this going to end? Is this going to even end on a good note? All right, so, and the bond between the group now, at this point, after Terminus and being on the road together for so long, they're a family. Their brothers, their sisters, their siblings, their fathers, their parents, their uncles, you get it. They are family now. And every loss was a loss of a family member. Maggie wasn't the only one that felt Beth's death. Sasha wasn't the only one that felt Tyrese's death. So, they're pretty much defeated. After Terminus, they're on such a high where they can accomplish anything. Then they go to get Beth back, and it goes so wrong. And now when they come in season 9, they're back on the road. 2 great losses. No food, no water, no safe place. They're definitely at their lowest. And then Aaron comes along. Now, at this point, do we trust any people? Even as an audience. At this point, do we trust Aaron? Forget about if you know the comics or not. It's totally relevant to the story, because now it's like every person we come across was either a bad person doing terrible things or a good person doing terrible things. So there was no way to win. So they finally put their trust in Aaron. Rick has a great speech that I think goes good towards the end of a movie, where he's telling Michonne, what did you hear outside of Woodbury? What did you hear outside of Terminus? Nothing. And then outside of Alexandria, they hear the children playing and everything. So you start to feel, as an audience, everyone, all right, maybe this is it, the safe place. They get in there. It's hard for them to adjust. Perfect tension towards the ending of the story. Great tension building to where you don't know if they're going to snap and kill everybody in Alexandria, or if the Alexandrians are going to kick them out. You have no idea. But you want them to be safe, because in those walls, they're safe. And they adjust. They get in there. Everything is good. Yeah, there might be some trust issues here and there and all that. But they're making it work. And then, boom. Thousands of walkers. Plus your final threat. So you have the biggest walker threat coming at the gates, trying to beat the gates down. And then on top of that, you have the final human threat. A group of savages that want nothing but to kill you and take everything you have. Oh, sorry about that. That's an alarm. I should have turned it off. My bad. So you have these groups of savages who attack. At the same time, you have thousands of walkers attacking. They savagely defeat the wolves, right? Done. Now they're left with the walker presence. There was some separation. Of course, that comes, the separation gets resolved, where all the people who were separated become back to Alexandria. They actually save the day. Rick inspires everybody to go out and fight the walkers. You have this great final battle scene against thousands of walkers where everyone's learned to work together and trust each other and take out the bigger threat so that they can live together as a community and strive. Whew. Sorry, I'm going to end this soon. I promise. I'm wrapping it up. And, of course, the terrible thing happens with Carl. Rick and Michonne rush Carl. Denise saves his life. Boom. You realize Carl's alive. Rick has this awesome speech where he sees hope. He sees a future. He sees that they can live and they can work together and they can make it through the zombie apocalypse. But they can only do it together. The same thing we've heard Glenn say and other characters throughout the show. So they can do it, but only together. And I think that's great. Perfect way to end it. A beacon of hope. Yeah, you know the zombies are still out there, but that's the reality of it. That's the world they're living in. Sure, you know there's more human threat because they had little things with the saviors sprinkled in that first half of season 6. But that's something you're always going to have to deal with it. But the point, the moral of it all is they can do it if they stick together as one community, as one group. And I think that's a very meaningful and poignant ending to a story. Whew. Now, I'm glad they didn't end it there, but I think you can look at it as that's your first half of the story. This next, what we're getting now, is the beginning of your second part of this fantastically told story. Now, maybe one of these days, if you guys like this video, I'll get into the character arcs throughout all those first 5.5 seasons. But, this took a lot of thought, a lot of breath, and hopefully I didn't take too much of your time. So that's my theory on how The Walking Dead is one self-contained, perfectly structured story from seasons 1 through season 6, episode 9, No Way Out. Definitely, if you like the video, show me some love below. You got anything to say, the good, the bad, the ugly, hit me up. Likes, dislikes, whatever you want to do. So if you want to join the Screen Fiend fam, you like the videos and everything, you want to keep getting more, definitely make sure to share, subscribe, and yeah, that's it. I'm still new at this, so bear with me. I'm trying to get better every time. Hopefully I am. Maybe you guys will let me know. All right, you have a good day, and I will see you next time.